CultivatED Marketer, episode 41, From Digital to Event Marketing with Jonathan Mast. In this episode of CultivatED Marketer, we talk with Jonathan Mast, who started in digital and social media marketing and has a unique experience on how he went from those disciplines into event marketing. A very unconventional conversation with Jonathan Mast. You'll want to tune in to hear more about that journey. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer. I'm flying solo today. This is Brent Bowen. Julie Masson and Matt Tidwell are still enjoying the halo of the holiday season. So I'm recording this introduction. Matt and I had, right before the holidays, we had a conversation with Jonathan Mast, who he's a Kansas City-based marketer. He and I crossed career paths. Actually, I think he was my backfill when I was in an engineering firm here in Kansas City. And then I left the digital marketing role and Jonathan came in as my replacement. And we got to know each other a little bit from that experience. And so I've always known Jonathan as one of the premier digital marketing professionals in the Kansas City area, if not the United States. But what's transpired with his career over the last couple of years is a transition from that digital marketing role to one of premier event marketing guru. He's a tremendous follow on LinkedIn. And in fact, I will share his LinkedIn profile in the show notes, as we always do. And you will see some of the insights he shares with event marketing. In fact, we talk a lot about event marketing, particularly in the age of artificial intelligence, and you can incorporate artificial intelligence into your event marketing. But we spend a lot of time in this conversation talking about how event marketing may be the one form of marketing that you can actually trust in the age of artificial intelligence. And so we unpack that conversation during this interview, and Jonathan has a lot to say about that, as well as how he transitioned and found himself getting into event marketing, and some tips for those who may be getting into the discipline or have spent years doing it, and those nice little touches that make those events truly memorable. So I can't wait to share this conversation with Jonathan Mast. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to CultivatED Marketer, where we talk marketing professional development so your garden of opportunity grows. This is Brent Bowen.
I'm Matt Tidwell.
And our guest today leads strategic branding, digital engagement, and thought leadership initiatives for the workers' compensation industry. With over 17 years of experience in digital media and corporate communications, our guest has a proven track record of driving brand visibility and managing large-scale events, which is honestly going to be a large focus of the discussion we have today. Really wanted to tap into the event industry and event marketing. Previously, he worked at Sedgwick, where he grew social engagement by 20% year over year for more than a decade. Passionate about innovation, he focuses on blending technology, storytelling, and industry experience. Jonathan Mast, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's my privilege to be here. It's good to be back with the gang again. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while, Jonathan. And, we were talking before the show that I was deep in the recesses of my memory there. I was thinking back to, I don't know, it was a PRSA or IABC lunch meeting somewhere. Like, we were all a little bit younger and a little less gray hair and things like that. But I can remember one of the very first social media presentations, this would have been 2004 or something like that. On social media and business, you delivered that presentation. I thought, wow, what an early adopter and a guy who has his finger on the pulse of you inspired me to be more contemporary with my reading and things like that, because you definitely have always been on the cutting edge. But hey, I'm super interested to hear. It's been a while since you and I have talked to hear about what you've got going on now. But I know, as Brent said, nearly 2 decades in your work blending digital media, corporate comms, branding. When you look back at all of that, what was the inflection point where you realized that strategic storytelling kind of had to be at the core of your approach?
Well, that's a good question. And as I was thinking about that, I have to go way back. And I always credit my ability for storytelling, communication. I'm so old that my dad was a pharmacist, and we owned our own pharmacy with a soda fountain and a comic book stand and all those good things. And I was Richie or Opie. I rode my bike to the store after school. But my dad, I grew up behind a pharmacy counter before it became big box. And my dad could talk, as he said, to a phone pole. And when people came to the pharmacy back then, it wasn't to ask, oh, by the way, where's the dishwashing detergent and the bathrooms? It was, they were sick. And you didn't meet people on their best day then. And so I really learned from him about, first of all, putting people at ease, listening to them, and then taking that and turning that into something that they could connect with and to begin that part of the storyteller. And I guess additionally, I'm from the South, so some history there, if you can't tell from the accent, of storytelling. And then as I moved into corporate communication, and one of the first big issues was we were with a really rapidly growing company, and our CEO said, I heard that we're not communicating well with the field. How can we do that better? And so that's when I raised my hand and said, let's jump in with this. And we did some traditional stuff, newsletters. But as we were talking again about the show, that's also where we kind of jumped into podcasting way back, so cool. Internal podcasts that didn't go outside of the environment, but it was such a great way people could re-listen to it. So the benefits podcast, somebody could listen to that 3 times and maybe get it better than reading.
Yeah, and just when I tell folks that Jonathan's an early adopter, what year did you start podcasting, Jonathan?
The first internal podcast was 2003.
Oh, yeah.
It's not often I end up meeting somebody that predates me in the podcasting space. So it's pretty,
Brent, I thought you were the early pioneer here.
Well, I had a point where what he was doing, we were doing that, but it was 1997 and I was still doing it on cassette tape.
Oh, yeah.
That's how we were distributing it.
I was going to say, were you sending out stone tablets? That cost a lot on FedEx.
We were still making people rewind. They couldn't skip. Yeah, they couldn't skip forward or back.
The Brett Bowen mixtape.
Hey, that's the in thing. Ask my kids.
I know it's back.
It's back.
It's back.
Oh yeah.
That connection. Let's talk about that connection a little bit, because you have a really interesting background about how you've gotten into event marketing. Matt was talking about his early rememberings of you was really around social media. That's how, when you and I, before we got on the air, we were talking about Social Media Club and
right.
The early days of Social Media Club. But that evolution of connection went from Social Media Club, and anybody that follows you on LinkedIn now can tell that you're extremely passionate about event marketing. Tell our listeners a little bit about how you ended up finding yourself knee deep in event marketing, because I find the origins of this so fascinating.
It really is probably like most of us. We never intend to stumble into something. But when I had left Sedgwick, went to Black and Veatch where Brent and I met, and then came back to Sedgwick. And at the time, our CEO was speaking at a lot of events, and there was some media coverage that had not been of no doing his own, but not favorable. And so as I traveled about and started following him, I was like, look, you're speaking at all these things and we're missing the opportunity to share this great content. So we started just doing, like I said, back then you could do anything and it was just, it worked. So he would step off stage and we'd do a quick YouTube video and just 3 quick questions. Like, for those who weren't here, what did you just talk about? And I got to tell you, some of those event people were a little uncomfortable in the early days because they're like, you're giving away our content and people aren't paying to hear this. And I said, but think about the 5,000 people who watched this that weren't here that now want to come next year and go, oh man, I could be there in person and talk to this guy. And they're like, oh, I get it now. And so I started live tweeting We did live Facebook broadcasts. We started sponsoring a pet dog thing at a large event, and I bought a GoPro and strapped it to a giant dog and had it walking around. We made sure it was a big dog because we didn't want any upskirt accidents or anything like that. You know, the friendly dog maybe running
Wasn't
around.
a pug.
No, it was not a pug or a chihuahua. But, you know, it was Wild West. And so as it went along, eventually about 8-9 years ago, they said, well, you know, you're already doing all the event stuff or you're at them. Why don't you just start managing it? And so I started with my right-hand person, and we started doing all the event stuff, merging it with social media, building the campaign before it began, during the campaign, taking the assets after the campaign. And eventually, as we grew into a global organization, we were managing over 300 events around the world. I didn't attend all of them, but we made sure somebody was there being actively part of that, both event and social digital campaigns, so that we got the maximum amount of our dollars. That was really the biggest thing, right? Organizations are going, you're paying a lot of money to sponsor and to go. So what are we getting for this?
Yeah, that's pretty incredible that the origins of your event marketing experience started in social. And it's funny that you talk about that in the sense of what's akin to now almost like a YouTube short, and that there were reservations about, oh, you're giving away the content in the equivalent of, it's not like anybody in the movie industry is saying, don't share the trailer. That's going to prevent people from showing up and putting their butt in the seat at the theater, right? So
yeah, I mean, you're talking a 30-minute to an hour presentation, and we boiled that down to 2 or 3 minutes.
Yeah.
There was nothing to compare to that in-person experience, and it began to pay off, and a lot of organizations saw that. So, and then I just to kind of continue to follow up, I fell in love with events. It just suddenly was like, this is amazing to see people walk away from something with energized and on fire about, we came to this, we got something out of it, whether we were attending as the organization and a sponsor or putting it on ourselves for 200 or 300 of our most important clients. To see people's faces light up and to have a genuine in-person experience was all sounds like, okay, this takes me back to being at the pharmacy. I'm getting to interact with people and give them something that they can take and carry with them, hopefully for a lifetime.
Yeah. And it's, and what you had articulated earlier, even too, it's not just the other attendees, but in a lot of cases, you're able to interact and engage with the individuals that are the thought leaders, that are the speakers there. I think so. One of the last events I was at earlier in the year was Digital Summit, and part of their programming was direct workshopping, table workshops with the speakers. So they were pulling speakers into the table workshops, which I thought that where else are you going to get? I mean, other than a webinar, but in person, where else are you going to get that? Right.
Yeah, it's that. No, I think that's 100%. It's that ability. It's kind of the early days of Twitter, when Twitter was cool, and you could tweet at someone and somebody'd say, why are you wasting your time on that? And I'm like, because I can tweet a beat writer for the Arkansas Razorbacks or the Kansas City Chiefs, and they would answer me. I'm like, my dad could have only dreamed of getting to talk to ABC reporter back in the day. I mean, that was reserved for important people. Now, regular dude like me can actually interact with someone, and then you put them in the room and it amplifies it.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad we're digging into this topic of event marketing, because it's really one we haven't talked much about on the show about. And so I just to have your experience here, Jonathan, is terrific. And boy, isn't it true that it's only taken 3 or 4 years? Of course, it only took me about 2 or 3 weeks after the pandemic, and we started having in-person events again, to realize just how much more robust the experience is, and how much more I retained, even if it's sitting in a session, whatever. It always seemed to be much, much better in person. But hey, when we think about whether you're running, let's say, a major event for a global audience, or even a smaller, more, say, a regional one, what are kind of some of the non-negotiables for event marketing that most teams might tend to overlook? And then maybe a second part of that question is, how do you keep people engaged before, during, and after an event? Is there a particular strategy there that you found to be good?
I think in some ways it's probably a lot of things you do when maybe you feel like you've got the secret sauce. There's really not secret sauce. You're just doing what is common sense. So number one, planning every detail for an event, starting through that process. And I want to give a shout out to all event planners, anyone involved in the event space.
Yeah.
And it's probably the same for digital creators as well. Everybody just says, oh, let's just create an event. Can you make that happen next week? And it's like, no. I was at a wedding a few weeks ago, and a local lady said, I'm getting ready to plan something in April. When do you think I should start looking for a space? And this was 6 weeks ago. I was like, last year? I don't want to be a downer, but you're talking April in Kansas City, and you want to find a premium space to host something for 500 people. It just doesn't magically happen. I mean, everything's possible with money. So, I mean, I'm really mad. I do think it was planning down to let no detail escape you. And I'm talking even things like, we made sure that if you went whatever venue we're at, that the hand towels had our logo on them, that you wouldn't think people would get excited about going to a bathroom and coming out with a logoed hand towel, but they're like, this is amazing. And so you just have to really pay attention to A to Z, soup to nuts, all those good sayings. Number one, to make an event really happen. That's the bottom line. If you get to event day and you haven't checked all those things off, including looking at the weather forecast, like what's the annual weather in Kansas City in April? Should I really be having an outdoor wedding? I mean, and we're talking, and I think it's true for an event for 50 people or 50,000. If the details are left out, something's going to fall through the cracks. And then you have to think of every possible thing that could happen. What is the unidentified object that's supposedly flying by the sun right now hit us in 6 weeks? What if that happens? Will we have candles to be able to read by? So I don't know if that's too simplistic, but I just think it's the key to success.
What I think I heard out of that was two things, which I'm a big believer in. One, the latter part was contingency planning. Always have a contingency plan. So anybody that's done event plan, and I did a lot of event planning when I was at University of Kansas through student union activities. A little shout out for student union activities. I need to give some money before the year's up to SUA. But then the other thing, so I heard contingency planning. The other thing I think I heard out of that was a little bit the Disney surprise and delight.
Absolutely.
And so maybe just as a quick follow-up, thinking about, you were attending all these events, but even before you took over some of the event marketing aspects of it, is there a moment where you were maybe surprised and delighted at an event, something that stuck out to you and just said, wow, that was just really impressive? So I'm thinking about your comment about the towels.
Yeah.
Was there something out of all these events that you've attended that really stuck out to you as a real surprise and delight moment?
Unfortunately, sometimes I think more of the things that disappointed me because isn't it true, again, on customer service, if you have bad customer service, you're going to tell 10 people. Mm-hmm. You hope if you have good customer service that they'll tell one or two, but usually they don't say anything. I can remember going to certain events, and I'm going to choose IAB or International Association of Business Communicators. There was one in New York City, and food. Let's just focus on one thing. Food is so expensive right now at events, but if you leave people hungry, they're going to complain and grouse. Mm-hmm. And I just remember in New York City, there were some of the most amazing like hors d'oeuvres and things. And I thought, wow, for a quote unquote nonprofit organization, that would not have been something that made the event, the locale, just a jump. But then again, currently negative things, man, just give people a place to charge their phones. Mm-hmm. And I think the gentleman you and I talked about, Julius Solaris, he says this a lot. Why do I see people in suits hunched on the floor, fighting over plug-ins like it's the Hunger Games? We should have plenty of availability for people to have charging stations. Just don't make life difficult, right? That will make people as impressed. And then you asked the second part about keeping engaged. You want me to jump on that?
Yeah.
I think for that, it's grabbing the moments. First of all, nobody needs a highlight reel anymore. We don't necessarily have to put together the 60-second. Look at everybody drinking and dancing. I think people want to take they want follow-up stuff. Like, I heard Matt talk about this. I heard Brent talk about this. Materials were promised. Get those materials out in a timely method, not 6 or 8 weeks later. I want to see that in my inbox when my plane lands on the ground. If you're promising those kind of things, even a post 30-day survey to say, what did we do right? What did we not do right? And reminder, we're going to be meeting again next year in this location, and sharing that content, keeping it kind of dripping out, keeping some back, maybe just a little bit, and then re-engaging people periodically with, hey, by the way, we did have that keynote speaker, and if you forgot, they left us with these 3 key points. And if you want to revisit that moment, that was that aha moment.
Yeah. And speaking of tech, and how it's changed meetings, boy, we all see this now, right? You go to the conference and you immediately are presented with this iPhone app that you're supposed to use throughout and again, you were talking about, little tech breakdowns that can ruin a meeting, John, right? It's like, now all of a sudden I can't find the agenda or the my pet peeve is the attendee roster is not on the app. I'm meeting, I'm networking. So you're right. There's all these little kind of moments. And now with technology, we have even more of them. You got to be on your toes. You got to have your
there are some not so good event apps out there, which is kind of shocking. You would think it would be better at this point in time. And you're right. I want to be able to see who's there. Are they in my space? How do I get in touch with them? Where can I go next? Give me direct. If I'm at a giant convention center in Las Vegas, I've gone to the SEMA Auto Show the last 5 years, the largest trade show in Vegas, I think, 165,000 people, 1 million square feet. And you're taking cars, you have to, it's a lot. And if they do it really well, I would love to meet the person who runs that event. I've never been able to actually talk to them, but talk about a planning, both thrill and nightmare. I mean, you're talking, that's a huge space, but getting people from one place to the other conveniently and not making me frustrated is a huge component. Just take down as many barriers
as possible. Yeah. Remove as many barriers. Matt touched on one part of technology. I'm going to shift the technology discussion a little bit, because this is something you and I, we had coffee a month or so back, and we started to talk, and that I end up speaking quite a bit in the artificial intelligence space as it relates to marketing. And then you said something to me that was so eye-opening, and it was a conversation that started happening about mid-year this year, where Mark Cuban, renowned technologist, right, said the repercussions of artificial intelligence, and particularly in audio and video, where I end up doing a lot of talking and we're seeing a lot of content produced, will lead to an explosion of face-to-face engagement in events, because it's the only thing we will know that's real. And he kind of calls it the Milli Vanilli effect, which then I asked my son, I'm like, do you know who Milli Vanilli is? And some other people that are Gen Z, they have no clue who Milli Vanilli is. So just for all our Gen Z listeners, Milli Vanilli is actually a pop group from the late 80s, early 1990s that were found to be fakes. So so this is where they lip synced all their performances, right? And then they got caught, and it was a big to-do. But anyway, so Mark Cuban's calling this the Milli Vanilli effect. How do you see all this playing out?
I was so excited to see somebody of his stature come out with that. And going back a little bit there, Matt, when you were talking about during COVID, and we pivoted hard to all the virtual meetings, and there was one particular meeting tool that we tried to use, and it was like, hey, invite somebody to a private room. And I thought that was the worst wording ever. I really want to ask a female colleague on a virtual online meeting space, hey, you want to join me in a private room? Does that sound positive or no? That was terrible. It just was not a good component. And we got 0 ROI from virtual meetings. So I'm sorry to all the virtual meeting people out there. And that's different from webinars. Those are great. Those have a purpose, but large scale just doesn't work. And yes, now we're looking at all the deep fakes, and I don't even try to know what's real anymore, because it's so difficult. And you see the fraud happening with senior citizens, which terrifies me as I get closer to that terminology being applied to me. And thinking about my elderly parents or in-laws who would probably not know in a 30-second call of someone asking me to give them their bank number, and it looked like me. And so you've got a generation of young people coming up who graduated during COVID, missed out on senior years, whole years of school, who are clamoring to get back interaction. They missed out on a lot of that. And so I think if I'm sitting here right now looking at you two gentlemen, I know you're, at least right now, I think you're still real. And so I think we crave that. And so I do believe we're going to continue to see us very strong growth in the in-person event space, whether that's maybe smaller, maybe not the 100,000 ones, but do we have 250 people or 500 who can get together and have genuine thought leadership exchange, networking? How are you going to add value to my growth personally, my company's growth? Where can we seal a deal? It's still going to happen over a cup of coffee or sitting potentially at the bar after a long day of sessions, and you see the business happen because there's still that genuine, I see you making a connection with me.
Yeah, it's still that trust and credibility of that relationship that you're establishing from that type of engagement. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, that's great.
The only thing I would add, guys, is I think this has applications very much so for young marketers, right? So I was in a class the other day and we were talking about different jobs in marketing and how they've evolved over time. And, when we were all in school, to be a copywriter, that would be a big deal, like in an ad agency. Well, heck, with AI, how prevalent are copywriter jobs going to be, at least at those entry levels? So, one young lady said, well, is there anything that we were just kind of batting around? What kind of job might potentially be sort of AI proof? And we talked about event marketing. So it's exactly that same point that we've just been discussing, and certainly that Mark Cuban made. And so little message there for young marketers in our audience. Don't forget about event marketing as a genre, because it could help inoculate you against what's coming.
Yeah. And if I could just add real quick, I mean, if you're in an organization, you're young and you're trying to find a way to make that difference, take that to your manager, to your supervisor, and say, have we thought about putting on something for our clientele? It can be small. You can start out with that 50-person event. It's still going to take a lot of work. Honestly, it's kind of scalable. You get the bones in for an event, but I think it's an opportunity for somebody young and hungry and has marketing chops to go out and bring a plan together and say, here we go. Here's how we can do something. And then you track it and show the ROI on that to your company, and you can see some growth.
Yeah, well said. Well said. Hey, I want to ask you, Jonathan, a little bit about your current industry. So your space is kind of the workers' comp area. Outcomes, expertise, those are what's important, right? Maybe mattering a little bit more than flash. You're not an athletic shoe company or that kind of thing. How do you thread that needle? How do you build an event presence that still feels dynamic and memorable while you have to kind of stick to your knitting around the expertise and the outcomes area as well?
Yeah, I don't think anybody has been accused workers' compensation risk insurance as being sexy. I mean, it's there is some to it. I mean, honestly, there is a lot of interesting, and the saying in our industry is very few people went to school to become a risk manager or work comp. However, when you talk about long-term stuff, people are going to continue to be injured. People are going to continue to need to get back to full health. And that's one of the things I'm enjoying the managed care space, which is we have field case nurses, nurse case managers, and those people truly are compassionate. They want to get people back healthy and to work. But you are also merging in the IT part of this, or the technology and Brent's part of AI, because as humans, we still make mistakes. And so as you look at artificial intelligence coming in and looking at errors and omissions, or reading hundreds of pages of many doctors' summaries and doing that almost infallible in seconds, what it does is it doesn't remove the human. It gives the human, especially in nurses, an opportunity to care for the injured worker, give that person that one-on-one attention that we all dread going to the doctor and getting 17 seconds of, what's wrong with me? Oh, he's leaving. I didn't get to ask all my questions. These nurses really do care about that, number one. Number two, you bring in the technology, you get talking about earlier about streamlining, building people, processes, technology. You bring those three together. And currently there's our CEO, Greg Moore, talks about a major doctor shortage. We are not producing enough doctors in the United States to keep up with the demand of the Jonathans of the world who are aging out. And so, but yet we're still working and we get injured. And if you have to wait 2-3 days to get into a clinic or some type of place that your company's partnered with, if we can take technology, work with doctors who do it really well, really efficient, and you know that Matt gets injured at work, and you, before you even leave your facility, you know you're going to be seen at that clinic for that wrenched knee or broken finger. That makes everybody more successful. And I think that's the goal, is let's have better outcomes. Let's make it seamless and efficient.
Yeah, that's helpful when we're thinking about the industry. And that's an interesting look at it, what we were talking about even before we were coming in here, about how do you align or provide complement between technology and people, right? And that you address the industry itself. When we're thinking about our roles as marketers or communicators, where do we see that shift coming in healthcare or managed care marketing? What's emerging now that you're paying attention to?
Yeah, I would say, is a traditional role. The industry has probably been a little bit slower on the uptake for new technologies and things. But I was thinking about it, and I don't know if you guys got your Spotify wrap yesterday, your year-end summary, but mine told me I was 24 years old. So I like anything that's not telling me that I'm getting a lot of AARP mail. So I like anything that points in the other direction. But when you talk about where we're going in the future in the risk and work comp space, I think that ability to, like a better term, adaptable branding. So as you come to a website and it knows your location, and we begin to gather, maybe people consider it invasive, but the more you learn about your customer, the better, as we advance the technology, we can take that back and envelop that person that we're interacting with. And so you can customize the experience so that you get it right for them. So that, again, it may be as simple as, do I want a text? Do I want a phone call? Do I want a video chat? I mean, that type of adaptive branding and understanding what works, because now in the workforce, I think it's right. We have at least 5 generations.
Yep.
I mean, it's crazy. You go to one of the big retail stores, and you're going to find somebody who's maybe even 16 or 17 working, gathering the carts. And I saw an interview with a gentleman the other day, and unfortunately he was 88 and still working to make ends meet. So all across the spectrum, you got the young and not as savvy who may be doing silly things and get hurt. And you have those of us who are aging, and we don't mean to get, but the injuries happen more frequently. I bent over to tie my shoe and I strained my back. I didn't mean for that to happen. But we have to,
part of the reality.
But we're going to have to make that, the branding is starting to shift to, even though it may not sound, it's not a shoe company, but it's, what is your experience in your workplace? How can we make your interaction with us? Because again, a lot of time it's not a time that you're going out and having fun. It's you're having an injury, you're dealing with your house flooding, there's been a hurricane, but we need to make it so that you're comfortable to interact with our organization.
Yeah, you're providing an amazing overview. Actually, we'll include this in our show notes. I saw a presentation not too long ago from Reagan and a software company called Workshop, where they demonstrated across the 5 generations, their preferences and how they are communicated with and engaged with. And they're vastly different. So this whole notion of personalization and personalizing that experience, demographically, or age is just one way to look at that. But I will include that in the show notes, because I've shared that a couple different times with people, but you articulated that so well as something to pay attention to from a communicator or marketer standpoint. So I really appreciate you doing that.
Yeah, for sure. Hey, Jonathan, it's been so good. I mean, you've been so generous with your time. I'm so glad we were able to get you on the virtual couch here and get a chance to catch up
It's
with
very
you.
comfy.
And yeah, exactly. And
Trying to
kinda
take
hear what-
good care of him here. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Feeling a little removed. I'm the one guy that's remote today, but that's okay. Hey, again, our audience, CultivatED Marketer, it's in many ways, it's younger professionals. And so when we get smart marketers like you in the chair here, we like to try to get them to kind of pass on as much experience, shall we say, as possible. So we'll do that for you as well. Looking back on your career, what leadership lesson did you learn the hard way, right? Something you now in maybe intentionally pass on to young marketers on your team as a learning lesson? I always like that kind of question. I'll throw it at you.
I've been very fortunate to have a couple of tremendous mentors in my life. A gentleman named Frank Huffman, who came and I worked for almost 10 years. And he was just, what he taught me, and I think my dad taught me too, though, is we want to be, sometimes I think we get taught, you got to be a jerk to get ahead. You got to be this hard, callous person. And both my dad and Frank just showed me that, being nice actually just can't be too nice sometimes. I mean, you being nice and generous to people with your time and your talents goes a long way. And I don't know if I'm original to say this, but I'm going to take credit for it today. While I was sitting in the car waiting to come up, I got to thinking about this question, and it hit me that the difference between cockiness and confidence is one letter. Confidence has 10 letters and cockiness has 9. But being confident is a big jump from being cocky. And I think a lot of times when we're young, we're cocky, we're full of ourselves, and we think we have to do something just to show out. And yes, I also believe if you don't toot your own horn, sometimes nobody else is going to do it for you. So there's that balance, right? But I do just believe that sometimes you can be kind and you can be nice as a leader and still go a really long ways in whatever your profession. So that's what I've seen demonstrated that I try to install in the younger generation that work for me. I'm just like, you don't have to come in here and be all up in everybody's face. You can actually take a nice, kind approach to this. And as they say, catch a lot more flies with honey than vinegar.
Yep. And the last time I checked, we're playing a team sport too. So sharing the, since Matt and I are both KU bred, sharing the basketball is not a bad thing from time to time, right?
Pass it around.
Pass it around. So I love that. So Jonathan, you've been so gracious with your time. Is there anything else that you'd like to mention that we may have missed?
Well, as a fellow podcaster, I know when it gets down to editing and you're trying to keep it in a time frame, I the last piece of wisdom is, keep them wanting more, not less. So a great thing to say, a great thing to remember in the boardroom, you don't have to talk all the time. Again, I think Mark Twain said, better to be quiet and be thought you don't know what you're talking about versus open your mouth and prove different by saying too much.
The doubt.
Yeah. So I'll leave it with those wise words there. Just, you don't always have to say too much. Sometimes you want, especially speaking, right? Presenting, sit down, be quiet. They'll come up and ask you if they want to know more. So I appreciate you guys. It's a great show. And I could talk for a long time, but I won't.
Well, we love that. I love that you're reinforcing the kindness and living the kindness right there in those remarks. You're too kind. So thank you. We've really enjoyed the conversation with you, and you being brave too, not just kind, but brave for being the inaugural in-person guest in the studio. I know Matt wasn't able to join us in person today, but we've really appreciated having you today, Jonathan.
Well, thanks. It's been great.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah. Good to connect again, and look forward to many more years.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. If you found value in today's episode, check us out on our website, CultivatEDMarketer.com. You'll also be able to subscribe to us, rate us, and leave us a comment on your favorite podcast platform, such as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Stitcher. Remember, a garden of opportunity grows with CultivatED Marketer.